Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. I feel that when I say headless heroics, most of us can cite a famous example. Can any of the high schoolers think of a heroic Sikh warrior who fought without his head? Baba Deep Singh, right? Most of us have heard of this story, and we were told this story when we were kids, maybe 4 or 5 years old. We're told to admire the determination and the bravery championed by Baba Deep Singh. And all these virtues are visually embodied in the iconic image of an 80-year-old man fighting his way to the Darbar Sahib, head in hand. Right? The goal of this presentation is to delve into the iconography, the meaning, and the depth behind the symbolism of this particular cultural reference. Thus, my talk is entitled Headless Heroics. And to do this, I want to look at the story of Kharag Singh. So Kharag Singh is a mythological story, and it's written within the Dasam Granth. So Kharag Singh is not a historical person. At the age of 9, Guru Gobind Singh received his father's head, his father's severed head, Guru Tegh Bahadur, at Anandpur Sahib. This sparked a transformative time period for the community. There was a unique pressure upon Guru Gobind Singh, unlike the previous gurus. On one side, you had the Mughal Empire, which was standing over the community and was culpable for the execution of Guru Tegh Bahadur. On the other side, you had the Hill Rajas, the local kingdoms, which saw the Guru as a threat to their security and prosperity. Internally, you also had the corruption of the community leaders, the Masands, which were taking advantage of the community. But you also had internal disputes, Sikhs that were claiming the status of Guruship, and who were actually writing their own literature in contention against Guru Gobind Singh. So it's in this charged atmosphere that a transformation took place. And that energy spilled over in a multitude of ways. Right? The literature that was formed during that period is just one manifestation of this, namely the Dasam Granth. For philologists, or those who study texts, and also historians, this presents us with an interesting problem. How do we read these compositions within the Dasam Granth? Although a lot of scholarship, modern scholarship, is contended over the issue of authorship of the Dasam Granth, whether Guru Gobind Singh Ji wrote it, whether rather he commissioned it by his court poets, this is not germane to my talk, because what I want to look at is the purpose of its formation and its subsequent effect it had on the community. And in that regard, the historical writings of the 18th, the 19th century are quite clear that the Sikhs of those time periods believed that the writings of the Dasam Granth were written by Guru Gobind Singh. And this is why these texts present interesting opportunities for researchers, especially the compositions within the Dasam Granth that are vernacular retellings of old Sanskrit classics, like the Valmiki Ramayana, which is represented in the Dasam Granth as the Ram Avatar, or the Bhagavad Purana, which is represented as the Krishna Avatar. The situations that Guru Gobind Singh Ji was dealing with were very complex, and this is represented in layering and the complexity of the writings themselves. They are not so easily mappable to simplified historical narratives. But we can see that these writings are putting forward ideals of behavior that transcend the political situation. One way of reading these texts is to identify unique portions within the plot lines of these retellings. Parsing out a section or story helps us to shed light on the underlying ideologies that are in play and that get used to define certain ideas about bravery, warrior duty, and notions of victory and defeat. And it's with this thought in mind that I began to examine the story of Kharag Singh, which I found to be a story which outlined the important characteristics and ideals of what it meant to be a warrior. This is important because these stories, like Kharag Singh, were just one component of how the community became more militarized during that transformative period. We know that this story of Kharag Singh was so important that it gets mentioned in a 1769 historical text called the Bansavali Nama, written by Kesar Singh Shibur, in regard to the duty of a warrior. The text mentions a dialogue between Guru Gobind Singh and several high-ranking Brahmins. And in that discussion, the Guru quotes a passage from Kharag Singh Prasang, speaking about the duty of a warrior. This is important because I believe this peculiar story of Kharag Singh to be emblematic of the core warrior spirit that Guru Gobind Singh wanted his brotherhood of Khalsa warriors to uphold. Kharag Singh possessed the indomitable spirit, fighting the good fight, and he did not miss a beat, even when his head was decapitated. The story of Kharag Singh is only around 350 verses, and like I mentioned, is recorded within the Dasam Granth, which is organized by compositions. Specifically, the tale is found within the composition of the Jobi Saptar, which is the 24 incarnations of Vishnu. And Kharag Singh's story falls within the Krishna avatar, which is the portion of that that's related to Krishna. So the Jobi Saptar is one of the largest components of the Dasam Granth, and the Krishna avatar is the largest component of the Jobi Saptar. The Krishna avatar is a rendition of the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Purana, and these retellings present an exciting field of examination for any aspiring philologist, because these retellings are not a line-by-line translation. So many questions arise. What was translated? What was not translated? Or what was added in to that translation? And this is why the Kharag Singh is especially important, because it does not find any mention in the original Bhagavad Purana. So this was a unique composition that was added in. The Krishna avatar is a martial text, unlike the original 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Purana, which is largely known for its Ras Leela, the stories of love between Krishna and the gopis. In contrast, the end of the Krishna avatar mentions the purpose of its composition, which was none other but to arouse the desire for righteous warfare, or dharam yudh. In the same light, the story of Kharag Singh is a martial text, and it comes from a tradition called Raso poetry, whereby poets would write in Braj Bhasha and mix in mythological and historical narratives into a fluid blend for the entertainment and inspiration of kings and chieftains and warriors alike. The literary tradition of Braj Bhasha is particularly relevant to the construction of much of the Dasam Granth. The language itself provided a unique mechanism to blend in both Persian and Sanskrit words. And in a way, Braj Bhasha was not only a bridge linguistically, but also culturally. It particularly became popular alongside Drupad music styles, which flourished in the court of Akbar and grew in popularity until the 19th century. So Guru Gobind Singh used this courtly literary tradition at his disposal when writing this tale. But I hypothesize that he also drew on his personal experience in shaping and forming this archetypal, indomitable Sikh warrior. We know the young Guru was 9 years old when he received his father's head at Anandpur Sahib. We must infer that this was a very influential moment in his life. As we know, some years later, when forming his new brotherhood, the Khalsa Panth, what did he ask for? He asked for 5 heads. The powerful idea that one's warrior duty required that one put it all on the line was represented in this sacrifice. But actually, in fact, this type of imagery comes from a long tradition of Sanskrit literature as well, which has used this imagery so much that it has a specific Sanskrit word for headless fighting body, Gabanda. This imagery becomes important as the story unfolds itself. So Shinamasta is probably the most famous example of this from Sanskrit literature. So I'll give you a brief summary of the Kharag Singh story. Kharag Singh's story is situated within the Krishna avatar, where an enemy of Krishna, Jarasandh, is laying siege to Krishna. Kharag Singh is a friend of Jarasandh and goes to war on his behalf. Kharag Singh starts the battle and defeats many warriors from Krishna's army. And it's not soon after that that the gods come down, such as Indra, Shiva, Ganesh, and they all challenge Kharag Singh. But Kharag Singh sends them in retreat. One particularly interesting point of the original Bhagavad Purana is when foreigners, the militia, or the barbarian armies come and fight against Krishna. However, this gets flipped around in the story of Kharag Singh. The militia army doesn't fight against Krishna. In fact, they come to Krishna and they in fact kind of traitor. They ask to fight for Krishna against Kharag Singh. And why is this important? I mean, to give it a little context, 2 years prior to the completion of the Krishna avatar, 4 battalions of Pathans, 400 warriors, betrayed the Guru, and they fought against Sikh forces at the Battle of Bangani, and ended up fighting with the Hill Rajas. So this portion of the story may have been a creative outlet, representing the betrayal suffered by Guru Gobind Singh. However, Kharag Singh was not deterred and successfully defeated the militia armies. It's at this point that all the gods assemble and conspire against Kharag Singh. And through a variety of ways of distraction and deception, Kharag Singh loses his focus. And in that one moment of vulnerability, Krishna fires an arrow that beheads Kharag Singh. However, without any hesitation, Kharag Singh picks up that head, throws it at Krishna, knocking him out, and Krishna falls off his chariot. Kharag Singh then goes to Shiva and slaps Shiva down to the ground. After seeing this, the armies of Krishna and Shiva, they retreat. And Kharag Singh sits down and absorbs himself in meditation. This mixing of bhakti and warrior duty is mentioned throughout the story. But this particular component is important because we see effects of this today with more modern stories of Guru Gobind Singh finding time in battle to sit down and sing Asa Di Var. So Kharag Singh, when the armies regather and fight against Kharag Singh again, he sends them again in their retreat. And Kharag Singh only stops fighting when all the gods, Krishna, Shiva, they all assemble and they submit defeat before Kharag Singh. Actually, one noteworthy aside is the bravery shown by a warrior called Ajit Singh in the story. And it's interesting because Sahibzada Ajit Singh, Guru Gobind Singh Ji's eldest son, was only a toddler when this was written, around 1 year old. He's actually one of the only warriors that it doesn't specifically mention that he's defeated when he fights against Kharag Singh, and it praises his bravery. At the end of the story, Kharag Singh and his origin story is explained by Krishna, who's questioned by his older brother, Balarama, as to who Kharag Singh actually was. Krishna explains to his brother that it was through a boon from Shiva that Kharag Singh received his power, and he promised to destroy the ego of the clansmen of Krishna. These clansmen thought that they had the protection of Krishna, and in not fearing anyone else, they became egotistical and proud. Krishna then reveals his internal connection with Kharag Singh, remarking that the highest Lord destroys ego, and that he is no different than Kharag Singh himself. This follows similarly with themes from the writings of Guru Gobind Singh, from the writings of the 24 Avatar, the incarnations of Vishnu, to the Bachitra Natak, to the incarnations of Brahma as well. There's a common hatred for kings and their pride. This does not seem far-fetched when you think of the circumstances that Guru Gobind Singh was facing. He had extremely negative relations with the local Hill Rajas at the time. It was in fact those Hill Rajas that Guru Gobind Singh Ji first engaged with militarily. There's no surprise then within the court of Guru Gobind Singh, the compositions being sung were those that geared at inspiring warrior spirit, reinforcing norms of bravery and devotion, and espousing a unique sense of sovereignty. Like I mentioned before, the notion of blending bhakti elements into this martial poetry was important for the story of Kharag Singh. But it's also important to the whole composition of the Krishna avatar itself, which the Kharag Singh story emerges out of. And the quote here is the passage that concludes the Krishna avatar. Blessed is that person who in this world keeps Hari on their mouth and contemplates war. One's body will not remain. It is not permanent. Praise of Hari is the boat which shall take you across the terrible ocean of existence. Make one's body the abode of perseverance. Enlighten that abode with the lamp of intellect. Take in hand the broom of knowledge and sweep away the dirt of cowardice. If there's one thing that's congruent within the retellings of Sanskrit literature in the Dasam Granth, is that there's a clear emphasis on carving out ideals of what it means to be a warrior. And the effects of these texts are long-standing within the community. For this reason, a closer examination into the Dasam Granth might be able to shed more light on the transformative period that took place within the community, even in the 17th century. Although Reinhardt and other scholars have very precisely outlined the debates surrounding the Dasam Granth, Further comparative analysis needs to be undertaken to inform us on the underlying ideologies that helped form notions of militancy in the Sikh community. Thank you.
Can I invite